May 10, 2023 Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group meeting. We are, my name is Daniel Weir. I am the chair this evening. We are holding a virtual public meeting today, and all participants with us are joining remotely. Just orient everyone to the virtual environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Tonight's meeting is available to join from the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group webpage, the county's events calendar, and at the top of today's agenda. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who may need it. If anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your video turned off and your microphone muted until you're called upon, and turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. These tools, the tools to do so are located on the command bar on your toolbar. And if you do not see the command bar, try tapping or clicking at the center of your screen to make it pop up. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. And if you are dialing in by phone, press star 6 to unmute. When you're finished speaking, please remute your microphone. The meeting chat's active for participants who need technical assistance only, and it should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comment must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. Some additional notes for our AWG members. If AWG members wish to be recognized to speak on an item, please turn on your video feed and leave your microphone unmuted. I will use video feeds that are on as an indicator for who would like to speak. Once you've been recognized, you may unmute. And once you've completed speaking, please turn your video feedback off. Let me ask, do we have any commission members who are joining us this evening? I'm going to take that as a no. If there are, however, then I will verbally check to see if anyone wishes to speak who are dialed in by phone. Additional notes for public speakers: you'll be called upon at the end of the meeting. We're going to do 2 items tonight, and if there's a small number of public speakers for the first one, we'll do that right away. If there are more than 2 or 3 public speakers for the first item, we're going to have all public comment at the end of the evening. When you are called upon, you will be asked to unmute as per instructions above, and you'll be muted when your time is concluded. And lastly, tonight is a public forum. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Ms. Sontag, I'll have you introduce our first item.
All right, the first item is for 3108 Columbia Pike, a GLUP amendment and rezoning, and I believe Anika from CPHD will be beginning the presentation.
Thank you, Olivia. Oops. Can everyone see my screen? Great. Good evening, members of the Form-Based Code AWG. My name is Anika Chaudhary with the Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development, and I'm here with Valerie Maslin with the Department of Environmental Services. This evening, staff will provide a joint presentation for the 3108 Columbia Pike item, which will consist of the site overview and background of the proposed project, followed by the general land use plan amendment and rezoning requests that are anticipated to be heard at the June Planning Commission meeting. I would also like to note that this will be an informational briefing, as this is not a form-based code use permit nor a type of use permit that is specifically being reviewed. That being said, I will hand it over to Valerie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Valerie Maslin. I am the project manager assigned to the 3108 Columbia Pike property project. To give you some background, the county purchased the 3108 Columbia Pike property back in March of 2022. The intent of it, as identified in the CIP, is to relocate the Columbia Pike branch library from the Arlington Career Center to 3108 Columbia Pike. It is currently identified to be relocated starting in fiscal year of 2028. Therefore, in the interim time, the property is available to be utilized as overflow parking for the Arlington Career Center while it goes under development. To give you an overview of the site, it currently has a 3-story building that is vacant and was utilized for a bank. It also has 63 parking spaces. Now, surrounding the property to the south are townhouses, to the west is the Audi dealership, and to the east is the Montessori School and Park City Golf. You can go to the next slide. So just to dive into the interim use of what we're intending to have, for the first step would be to demo the 3-story building that both align with the interim use and the long-term use to relocate the Columbia Pike Library. Second step would be to expand the parking lot from the existing 63 parking spaces to 92 parking spaces. And thirdly, we would
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Linda Dye from Douglas Park. I don't see any slides. All I see is a blank screen. I can see the participants at the bottom, including you, Valerie, but I see no slides.
Hi, Linda. You might need to try leaving the meeting and rejoining. That might refresh your screen.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, just to go back and summarize, with the interim use, our third step is to lease the parking lot to APS, and this will be for them to utilize as overflow parking for staff and construction workers. So I'll dive a little bit more into what the existing property looks like and what the interim proposed property will look like. So on the left-hand side, you see the existing, which Columbia Pike is located on the north, which has 2 entryways for the property. One of it's actually used as an entryway and the other one as an egress. It also has a 3-story building along with 63 parking spaces towards the south. On the image on the right-hand side, which is the proposed image, we would still have 2 entryways into the property, one of them for entry and one of them for egress. We would expand from 63 parking spaces to 92 parking spaces. There will also be a landscape strip along Columbia Pike, and parallel to that would be accessible parking spaces. All of the existing trees would remain along with existing lighting, and we would add additional trees and lighting as needed in the property. Now, for the future use, it's identified to relocate the Columbia Pike Library in the CIP starting fiscal year 2028. There also is a potential to have a mixed-use development for county board priorities, such as affordable housing. And along this process, there will be community engagement for long-term vision. Now I'll hand it over to Anika.
Thank you, Valerie. In terms of the GLUP amendment and rezoning, the requests are as follows. In order to facilitate the creation of a publicly owned parking lot at 3108 Columbia Pike and support the short and long-term vision for the area, this is a request for a general land use plan amendment to the public facility map and table to identify this site for a proposed publicly owned parking lot as the feature shown in the county's comprehensive plan, and a rezoning from R5 and C2 to the S3A zoning district. The short-term and long-term vision for the area is to build the Career Center on the adjacent site and relocate the library at this location. Therefore, allowing for the publicly owned parking would help facilitate the construction and reduce parking impacts on the surrounding community. The current GLUB designation for the site is service commercial and is within the Columbia Pike Revitalization District and under public ownership. The proposed interim use of the property as a publicly owned parking lot prior to its long-term future use as a new Columbia Pike library is consistent with the current GLUP designation. However, given the county ownership of the parcel and the county's intention to provide interim parking serving the APS Career Center campus during its redevelopment, a GLUP amendment to amend the GLUP public facility map and associated table to identify this site as a publicly owned parking lot will make this a feature shown in the county's comprehensive plan as needed to fulfill the public facility state code requirements and further reinforce the county ownership beyond the crosshatch and clarify the proposed use. The proposed parking lot use, which will be the future county library, is recommended to be added under the public parking category as part of the county's comprehensive plan. Staff expects the category would be changed to public library at the appropriate future time when the long-term uses are established. The final details of the long-term future vision for the site will be further determined through a separate community engagement process with potential for additional changes to the GLUP, its public facility map and table, as well as the zoning for the subject site to support the future uses. The future public facility at this location would not conflict with the form-based code guidance for the site, which is for mixed-use development up to 6 stories. So therefore, a public facility could be part of the mixed-use development in the future. In addition to the proposed GLUP amendment, an associated rezoning is proposed to reclassify the site from R5 and C2 to S3A. In accordance with the zoning ordinance, the existing C2 district requires a special use permit for proposed commercial parking use, and the existing R5 district does not allow for commercial parking. A rezoning is requested to facilitate the creation of a parking lot for APS staff and contractors during the Career Center construction, as the S3A district is an appropriate district to accomplish the near-term objectives for a county-owned operated surface parking area, which may become available for public use once the Career Center needs are met. In addition, while the S3A district has multiple functions, both for parkland and public facilities, including schools and libraries, it can also support a publicly owned parking lot, which is allowed via a use permit, thus conducive for the interim use. Once the future vision of the site is established, the S3A district will be evaluated and confirmed as the preferred zoning, and the form-based code redevelopment is possible with the S3A zoning. Furthermore, as a use permit standard for commercial parking requires a 25-foot separation between the proposed surface parking lot and adjacent R districts, a 25-foot no parking area has been striped with no parking signage adjacent to the houses to the east of the property in the R5 district to maintain this separation. Although the surrounding buildings are being used as a school, it is still tied back to the R5 district and not being used as dwellings. As shown here, the Columbia Pike Special Revitalization District form-based code identifies the site on the Town Center Regulating Plan as a combination of Main Street in red and local in blue frontage types. When we think about redevelopment under the form-based code, the Town Center Regulating Plan calls for mixed use up to 6 stories, transitioning down to 4 stories as we come south to the future 11th Street, and realignment of South Highland Street next to the site between 11th Street and Columbia Pike, which will shift west in the future, and are all factors that will go into the planning for the long-term condition. In terms of the anticipated timeline, after tonight, the project will be presented to the LRPC at its May 23rd meeting for their awareness prior to the May 31st Planning Commission meeting. DES has notified adjacent property owners of the anticipated project via email and in person, and is in the process of notifying affected engagement groups. Legal notices are expected to be sent out to adjacent property owners later this month. In addition, the process to determine the future long-term use is to be determined, and a county board request to advertise the GLUP amendment for a publicly owned parking lot during Career Center construction will be heard at the May 13th County Board meeting this Saturday. The proposed GLUP amendment and rezoning requests will be heard for final consideration by the Planning Commission and the County Board next month, and the associated use permit request for commercial parking is anticipated to come forward concurrently for County Board consideration in June as well. These approvals will facilitate the final steps needed to advance to construction and are necessary to support the site's conversion to a publicly owned parking lot. Construction of temporary parking improvements is anticipated sometime this summer and either the summer through fall timeframe, and projected completion of these improvements and the start of the Career Center construction is expected in early 2024. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see some hands up. The one thing I want to note first is just for clarification, if I remember right, this is informational. So the ask of us tonight, excuse me, is for suggestions, feedback, information that we need, etc. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I'm just going to go in the order that I see hands. We'll start with Betty Siegel.
Hi, Betty. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Welcome to the Form-Based Code, Daniel. I'm excited to have you as your first time chair of this committee. I had some questions. Staff was referencing that the site was adjacent to the Career Center, so I got a little confused there. Because isn't it like a block and a half away? And then secondly, two other things. One, will the sidewalk, when it's when that site is improved or converted into parking, be conform with our current standards for 10-foot widths and all the street trees, et cetera, et cetera? And secondly, I'm a little concerned about the may language, that this site, once it's done being a parking lot for teachers and construction workers for the Career Center, that it may become a public library. I would like to see very clear language in here, or at least a recommendation from the Form-Based Code that it's not that it may become a library, it will become a public library site. The ambiguity of may makes me incredibly nervous. And also I'm unclear why it would take till 2028 to convert the parking lot to a library when the APS is supposed to be done with all construction on the site in 2026, I think was what they told us last night at our community meeting. So those are my points. Thank you for your good presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Linda Dye.
Okay, thank you. I also would tag on to Betty's comments about what's going to happen on Columbia Pike, that stretch with a 6-foot clear sidewalk and planting strip, and also the bus stop. I assume the bus stop will stay there in some form. If not, then we need to know that. I've got questions about, is there any possibility that the county will take advantage of this opportunity to construct the north side of 11th Street to join the south side of 11th Street that was built as a part of the Axomite development? Also, I have a comment on the required no parking zone within 25 feet. It doesn't appear that that extends far enough north on the east side. to cover all 3 of the houses, which we understand Montessori is using. And also, as shown on the slide 13, will the 7-foot wall be built on the east side? And what kind of wall will or will not be built on the west and south sides of this property? And that's it so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. There were a couple questions there. I'm going to get all of the, I'm going to go to everyone whose hands are up before I go to staff for any answers. Mr. Gibson, I saw, for instance, at one point your hand was up. But next I'm going to go to Chris Slatt.
Thanks so much. I think I'm doing double duty tonight as both Penrose's alternate and the Transportation Commission guest rep here for this. I had a couple comments and questions. I wanted to kind of echo Betty Siegel's comment about making it really clear that this will not stay a parking lot. Interim and temporary uses have a nasty habit of becoming permanent uses if you're not really, really, really clear up front that they are temporary and interim. I wanted to ask about the no parking section. It sounds like it would be striped off pavement, and I don't really understand why we would pave that if nobody's supposed to be parking on it. So I would love some clarification on that. It also, I would assume the county would not yet be building out their northern portion of 11th Street, that would wait until there's something to kind of fully connect it to. But it does look like maybe we're planting a tree in that right of way, which doesn't seem like a super great idea if I'm reading the plans here correctly. And then I think my final question is if we really need to retain these 2 very large curb cuts across the sidewalk. It seems like this is a parking lot that could be serviced by either 2 narrower curb cuts or a single 2-way wide curb cut to kind of reduce the amount of conflict across that sidewalk. And I did want to also echo, it would be great if we could bring this sidewalk up to our current standards, because I don't think it meets the form-based code streetscape standards from a sidewalk width perspective. So again, echoing somebody else there. I think that's all I got for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other AWG hands up. Do we have, I want to ask, do we have anyone who is here to give public comment on this? If so, please mention so in the chat. And if not, now why is my hand up? If not, I want to go to Mr. Gibson. I see in the chat that you said you can respond if the applicant doesn't wish to. So I will. I'll throw it up as a jump ball for either to reply, and then we'll go back to Betty.
So I can reply to probably most of the questions that were asked. I just want to make sure that if I miss any of the questions that you all remind me, because I know there was a laundry list of things that were asked. But one of the things that were talked about was if it's a maybe that the Columbia Pike Branch Library will be relocated. At this point, it has been identified in the CIP, and it is intended to be relocated. The reason why we're saying fiscal year 2028 is because that's when the CIP has identified funding for that project to do construction. That is the reason for waiting until fiscal year 2028. In regards to the sidewalk, currently there is no changes to the sidewalk nor the curb cuts. It is to remain as is, to have the least amount of construction happening to the site during the interim period of time. The only thing that will change is there is a bench and a trash can that are currently in the sidewalk. Those will actually be pushed back so that they are within the property and outside of the path of travel on the sidewalk. For the no parking striping that is on pavement, the pavement is existing there, so therefore that's all we're doing with striping it. We're not removing the pavement, just to limit the amount of construction that's happening during an interim use. For the tree that was mentioned that is in the proposed area for the extension of 11th Street, that is an existing tree that is not being removed under this project. Trying to think, were there any other questions, Daniel, that I might have missed?
I don't think so. Thank you, Valerie. I want to follow up on the just well, I'm going to follow up on one question, and then I'm going to go to Linda. You know, you're demolishing a building, right?
Yes.
And so there will be construction at the streetscape because heavy equipment takes its toll on the curb and the sidewalk, right? I mean, the curb cut's going to have to be rebuilt. Is the idea that is in fact not going to be the case, or is it the idea that it will simply be rebuilt to existing spec?
The intent is to not rebuild it at all at this time, to keep what's existing.
So the intent is to not damage it during
Exactly.
in moving demolition equipment onto and off of the site.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that answers the question. Linda and Betty, I told you I was going to recognize you. Well, let me take that back. Linda, I'm going to go to you and then Betty.
Okay, thank you. Is there going to be a 7-foot wall constructed on the east side, as is identified on slide 13? And what kind of wall will be constructed on the west and south sides? Yeah, so that's the question. 7-foot wall, etc.
Currently, the wall that's been identified on the east side is to meet the requirement to separate an S38 zoning from an R5. That's why it's only on the east side. It is not a requirement in the other parts of the property.
Okay. The bus stop. No, I'm frankly disappointed to hear that we're not going to see an improvement to the sidewalk and have a planting strip as part of this. But okay. But what about the bus stop? Is that staying there, or will it, I assume it will have to be at least temporarily moved either east or west a little bit, because once the construction really gets going full scale?
At this point, the intent is to keep it at its current location, but we can definitely evaluate if for safety reasons it should be relocated during construction.
Okay. And again, going back to the no parking zone on slide 6, it doesn't look like it extends far enough north to fully cover the northernmost of the 3 houses that are being used by Montessori.
So right now, that property for the Montessori, half of it is zone R5 and half of it is zone C2. So the requirement is only to have the buffer in the R5 zone, not the C2. That's why it ends where you see it.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think that covers mine. Thank you.
Betty, back to you, and then Rob, I'm going to call on you.
Yes, thank you. I just want to support, I think, what Chris was saying, and Chris, I might need your clarification that you would like to see fewer disruptions to the sidewalk by improving the entrance and exits from this parking lot, because one of them is very close to a crosswalk. So you've got a light there, and then you've got people turning out of a parking lot who may not see the light or think the light applies to them. And also it's bad for pedestrians to have to keep like, oh no, it's another driveway. Oh no, another driveway. So I just want to clarify, Chris, that you are asking for us to, the county, to find a way to clean that up a little bit so there's less disruption for pedestrians.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to
Okay,
me like
thank you.
one 24-foot wide curb cut ought to be enough for bidirectional traffic in and out of this parking lot to me.
Okay, so when you say curb cut, you actually mean a driveway that's interrupting the
Yes,
sidewalk. Okay, cool.
exactly.
Curb cuts in my world of accessibility mean something else. But then that sidewalk will continue to be a clean pedestrian pathway. So that was one. So I absolutely support Chris on that. I want that to be clear. I absolutely support what Daniel says, that traffic and construction and all that kind of stuff going to tear up that sidewalk. And this committee, and Linda, you can correct me on this one or remind me if I'm misremembering, but this committee has said all along that anytime anything touched within the form-based code, the commercial sector, that we want the sidewalks brought up to compliance with the form-based code.
That's my understanding as well. And it seems to me this is an opportunity. I just don't believe that we're going to be able to get away with there won't be damage to that whole area. So I think it's just a great opportunity to put in a planting strip and put in a 6-foot clear sidewalk and bring it up at least partially to all the standards that we require for any sections of pedestrian walkways.
Yeah, okay, I thought I remembered that correctly. So I think that this committee would have to insist that this sidewalk be improved to bring it up to the standards in the form-based code. That's been our policy and our practice all along. And then finally, again, I would like the question about the adjacency to the Career Center addressed, because this isn't adjacent at all. And I understand that the CIP doesn't have anything built on here, but you are. I would really like assurances that this it shall be a library, and then whatever else goes on the space, but it shall be, not may. And I'm done.
Rob, you might be able to actually answer this, but Betty, I assume that when you talk about sidewalk improvements, you're incorporating Chris's suggestion about going from 2 to 1 curb cuts as well. Yeah,
Yes.
I see a nod. Thank you. Rob, I would love for your thoughts on this, and for my colleagues' sake, just I'm going to be off of video for a while. My apologies. I am trying to use my baritone to lull a 6-month-old to sleep. So even if I had my video on, you wouldn't be able to see me. But Rob, to you.
Thank you. Robert Gibson from Arlington County DES Development Services. So in reviewing, DES plays 2 roles in this process. So DES is both the applicant, and then staff like myself review applications and provide feedback. In reviewing this application, what we found is that the existing streetscape along the frontage was one of the first sets of Columbia Pike form-based code improvements. So I think it's from Glebe Road all the way back to Walter Reed, this segment was reconstructed, providing improved sidewalks with the concrete sidewalk and brick paver banding, along with I believe there's at least a 6-foot clear plus a 6-foot buffer. There is one existing street tree that will remain in a 5x12 tree pit. And then as far as the issue of removing a curb cut, I think we can take that under advisement and work with DES to consider that further. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Let me ask one more question, and that is, why? My guess is that the Montessori school is indifferent as to their zoning status, and if the cost of keeping them in a zoning status that they don't potentially care about is those 12 spots, then why is our approach, and this is I'm making an assumption, just arguendo, right? But if that were to be the case, then why would we why not make those inquiries if that means that we can utilize those 12 spots, especially if the difference is, especially if what that opens us up for us is an improved streetscape, or potentially doing something with the northern part of the 11th Street right of way. And let me just embed one more datum into that. I know that at least Tuckus Caratons has opined on Twitter, so make of that what you will, that there's more that we can be doing with the county's existing owned portion of the 11th Street right of way than the current sort of just mulched space. So I'm going to stop talking and yield the floor back to the experts, but that's my question there.
If I can jump in for a second, just to
Matt.
throw this in the ring. This segment, and I'm not sure if it was Chris or somebody else that confirmed this, was already completed with the multimodal work, with the undergrounding of utilities, streetscape improvements, and looking at what's already in place. New Columbia Pike already includes a streetscape zone and a clear sidewalk, which I believe is right now is only 4 feet. And DES or others that are on the call confirm the challenge involved in adding an additional 2 feet to the clear sidewalk, or perhaps correcting if that's all that would be needed to address some of the requests we heard from Betty and Linda, kind of going from the 4-foot sidewalk to 6 feet, which we typically would need to receive in the future when the library arrives and form-based code redevelopment is triggered. But are there challenges and obstacles today in this interim condition where those 2 additional feet present obstacles and bigger improvements that are planned?
The existing sidewalk there is documented at 10 feet wide. So I'm not really sure what the additional requirement would be.
And when you say 10 feet, that includes the street tree zone, basically back of curb all the way?
No, that's the sidewalk. The landscape, the tree landscape that we're adding is in addition to that.
Matt, I think you're correct. The area where the one tree pit is inclusive of that 10-foot wide sidewalk.
Okay.
But what I do want to point out is that this segment of sidewalk is not a unique segment. It is a continuous set of sidewalk that has been built out with that project that is seamless and integrated. And the county is fully committed with the future redevelopment of the site, where we're putting a significantly larger capital investment into a number of form-based code standard requirements consistent with redevelopment.
All right, so what we see here is basically what now a good chunk of Columbia Pike already has, where development has not happened, in terms of kind of the clear sidewalk condition that we were seeing.
Matt, if I can share my screen, I'll just pull up the street view to give a better idea of what the condition is, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is the streetscape along the frontage. We see
We're not seeing it yet.
Uh-oh. Okay, thank you. Here you go. Does that pop up?
There we go.
So
There you go.
this is the condition out there today. So we have the one curb cut on the east side. We have a uniform sidewalk with the banding at front and back, the single tree pit. As you said, all aerial utilities are undergrounded, new county standard street lighting. This bench, trash can and flagpole associated with the transit stop would be moved to the back of sidewalk to remove any clear issues in this area. And as you look to the east, you see how this sidewalk continues to the east. And now as you look to the west, you see how it is consistent with the improvements that the county made in the first multimodal investment along the pike. Thank you.
And I think if I'm understanding this right, the challenge of expanding it further into the property to gain the 6 foot wide that we typically have with redevelopment is that it basically would impede, I guess, on the parking lot circulation, because I think once those Columbia Pike facing parking spaces are set back, then I guess the internal circulation is impacted and it kind of has a domino effect. Is that right?
I don't think, I think that this is principally an issue of project scope and budget, in the sense that we did not look at making those improvements with this demolition and temporary disposition of the property.
Oh, thank you both. Matt or Valerie, or is anyone able to speak to the issue of, or maybe it's enough just to say that you'll look into it further about, is there any way to, would it be worth it to make inquiries about whether the school would be willing to rezone and exchange so that we can get those extra spots in the lower right opened up?
Daniel, we can definitely look and see what impact it would be to expand the sidewalk. We have looked into possible exceptions of getting the no parking zone not included in the bottom of the, I guess, the southeast of the parking lot. And at this time, we've been told that we have to have that no parking zone area. But we'll look and see what options and how it would impact the property if we expand the sidewalk. But we're uncertain at this time what it will do. And we absolutely want to, have the most amount of parking spaces that we can provide APS just because of their need. And having this parking lot for them will relieve any parking that construction workers or staff would have to do in the streets. So this is part of what we're trying to provide for them.
Thanks. Is there anything else on this item, or any public speakers who, well, do I see a hand? I'm going to go back to Betty and then Linda, and then Betty, I'm going to go back to you, Betty.
Okay, Linda and I are playing ping pong today. I would like to go on record as saying that I would like to see Matt's deep knowledge of the form-based code taken advantage of in this case, and Linda, Di, and I remembering that we don't make exceptions to the sidewalk rules, and we haven't. When anybody has gone on Columbia Pike and made changes. And I think it is a bad precedence to set to allow the county to violate the form-based code, because it makes it harder to hold the private folks to that standard. So I would really like to see this. We don't take votes on the form-based code and stuff like that, but I'd like to go on record as saying that I think it's important to get those extra 2 feet. You're going to need it anyways when you build the library. And I still haven't heard anybody respond back to we are going to absolutely get in writing that will be a library, not that it may be. And now I'm done. Linda, you're up.
Okay, if we can go back, the south side and the west side, it's still not clear to me. Is there some sort of solid wall? If I cannot remember now what the back of the old SunTrust, what kind of wall there might have been. But what kind of, what kind of wall, if any, on the south side and on the west side? And in conjunction with that, what kind of lighting plan in general will there be, especially on the south side, since that area is facing the Axumite residents?
Linda, I can tell you that there's presently about a 4.5, about a 5 or 6 foot wall, brick wall, that is between Axumite and the bank lot.
Okay, from a security standpoint, what is the plan now? To simply retain the west and south walls?
For the walls, there's actually a requirement to increase the height of them. And for the lighting, the existing lighting will remain. Only lighting will be added to the new parking spaces.
Okay, all right, so, okay. Is there any schematic that shows what the current lighting plan would be? Is there anything available? Either a photograph or a schematic? So we have some rough idea.
In the proposed plan, in the slide, it shows. Nika, can you go to it, please? So it's it's hard. Is there any way we can zoom into it? It's kind of hard to show. But we still have to go through a lighting study on it, but there is right now being proposed two lights are being relocated, and I believe 2 additional lights may be added to the parking lot. All the other ones are remaining, but we still have to finalize the lighting study to make sure we're providing the adequate amount of light for the parking lot.
Okay, my concern is security for anybody who's trying to use it, since this is not going to be it's an interim use, but it's still not going to be a short-term interim use. So safety of folks actually being able to use this interim parking lot is really important. Thank you.
Well, and it's also right across the street from, or not right across the street, but very close to a hotspot for public safety issues. I just cut someone off. I do want to recognize, I'm sorry to whomever it was. I do want to recognize Matt, and then to the person I cut off, back to you. I don't think we have any public speakers, but I want to get on to our next item as well.
Hi, Chair Weir. This is Anika with staff. I just wanted to answer one of the questions from earlier about, I think there was a question on the of the library use. It may be a library use, so I wanted to note that the adopted CIP does recommend this to be a future public library, and so we would need to revisit the long-term uses in order to confirm. So at this time, we are anticipating it, noting it as a proposed library use, or it may be a library use.
Thanks, Anika. Matt, is there anything else you want to add for us?
Just real quick, somebody put me on the spot. Going back to the sidewalk width, ideally, and I think if we feel best practices warrant, or the conditions warrant, 6-foot sidewalk is obviously desired, and we do see it everywhere else where development is happening. However, in this case, we are not actually reviewing and commenting on a form-based code redevelopment. We're reviewing something of a rarity along Columbia Pike, which is an interim condition in between what's used to be in place versus what in the future might be. And maybe there's only a 10-year gap between those two conditions. So as a result, it's more similar to a by right improvement that most property owners have the access to. However, in this case, it requires a rezoning and a glove change. So there's obviously more moving pieces involved. I would say that from a long-term perspective, what we try to do is make sure that these interim improvements don't preclude our ability to gain and achieve those long-term objectives, like a 6-foot wide clear sidewalk, like, you know, some of the open space improvements and the rear portion of 11th Street, you know, somebody mentioned, is this going to deliver that? When redevelopment would be envisioned and the library and potentially other uses would be coming in, we would make sure that at minimum that space is set aside, dedicated to the county and reserved for a future time when we can build 11th Street. So that would be one example where we're making sure those future improvements are basically being set up as interim actions take place and don't preclude them from happening. And in this case, I think what would be really helpful, and maybe it can happen, you know, after the meeting, is to hear from DES as a follow-up, you know, what's preventing and what the conflict is from gaining those 2 additional feet on Columbia Pike, and then maybe making a further statement that when redevelopment will happen, those 2 additional feet, if not more, will be delivered with a typical form-based code project.
And Matt, just to be clear, I believe it's 1 additional foot. Just, I think
Okay.
it's at least
So
5 feet
net.
of clear currently, and so with a 5-foot tree and planting zone.
All right, so we're close. All right, that's all I had.
Thank you, Matt and Rob. I'm now not seeing any hands down, so I'm going to ask one last time in case there's any people who are here for public comment. And failing that, I will thank everyone for their presentations and feedback. And I believe, Olivia, we can go to the next item unless there's something I've missed.
Thank you. No, I think we are ready for the Career Center item. I will go ahead and share my screen. All right, just making sure, Matt, your hand is still up, just making sure. Is that a leftover hand? All right.
Just load it.
Okay. So my name is Olivia Sontag, and I'm with the County Planning Division, and I'm the project manager for this use permit for the Career Center, which is located at 816 South Walter Reed Drive. A couple other staff members joining me this evening include Rob Gibson from DES, which we heard from on the last item, and then Bethany Heim from DPR. So similar to the last item, APS has opted not to use the form-based code use permit process and has instead applied for a special exception use permit using the underlying S3A zoning. So this is being shared as an information item. As we know, the AWG has heard this before, and it is partially within the commercial center's form-based code. So the presentation this evening will include an overview of the GLUPs and zoning, an overview of the use permit proposal, the relationship to the commercial form-based code, the process and schedule, and then we'll get a more comprehensive presentation from the applicant. To start us off, the underlying zoning here is S3A, the special district. The GLUP zoning is public under public ownership, and this note here signifies the Columbia Pike Special Revitalization District, which is shown on this 3rd map on the far right. So you can see here this black dotted line here is the Columbia Pike Special Revitalization District boundaries. And the site is specifically within the commercial center's form-based code, town center regulating plan, which is an optional and an alternate zoning overlay for development within this district. So the site is outlined in black, and as you can see, only about the southern 2/3 of the site are within the revitalization district. So an overview of the use permit proposal today. The applicant is proposing a 5-story new career center shown down here, signified by the letter A, and then a 4-tier above grade garage up here on the corner of 9th and Highland. This also requires a partial demolition of the existing career center building here, which just kind of follows this outline that I'm showing on the screen. So this is to facilitate the construction of the parking garage in the corner. The proposal also includes the demolition of the existing Fenwick building, which sits down here at letter D. That application is in and is anticipated to be approved sometime this summer once the building is vacated for the school year. They're also proposing a central curbless plaza that follows this kind of striped marking through here, around this field, and up and back to South Highland Street. So this will be limited to buses and pedestrians and cyclists. They also have a synthetic turf field, which is not regulation size, but will serve the needs of different activities and recess and such for some of the buildings on campus. They're also proposing a number of MPSA play area improvements around the existing MPSA building. And then there are a number of streetscape and site-wide improvements, additional trees being planted, and some stormwater facility improvements throughout the site. There are some modifications being requested to the zoning ordinance requirements. These are different from the form-based code modifications. So these modifications include changes to parking, the height, and the setbacks, which is allowed to be requested within the S3A zoning district. I do just want to note the existing Career Center programs, which APS will outline in their presentation. The Columbia Pike Branch Library and the MPSA program will continue to operate throughout construction. And then some of the items that are not included in this use permit are the MPSA program relocation, demolition of that building, and adjacent streetscape improvements, as well as a gymnasium addition that is envisioned potentially for the future, which sits in this dotted line over here on the corner of 9th and South Walter Reed. So again, APS has opted not to use the form-based code use permit process and has instead applied for a special exception use permit consistent with the S3A zoning. But I did want to highlight some of the form-based code guidance for the site. So this site fronts local and neighborhood frontage building envelope standards shown in the blue hatching and the gold hatching within the kind of red boundary shown on the screen. So these address building placement and heights, site design, such as a mid-block connection, which APS has proposed in a slightly different location. I can back up to the last slide. And you can see again that the envisioned mid-block connection was right about here, and they've instead proposed another mid-block connection here, which again is limited to pedestrians, cyclists, and buses. So back to this slide, these standards also address streetscape improvements, which for the form-based code would include a minimum 6-foot clear sidewalk zone and then average spacing for trees at around 25 to 30 feet. And then, which in APS's presentation, they'll show where they're improving the sidewalks and the placement of street trees. And then it also has different parking requirements for vehicular and bicycle parking. So this site has a very long history, but in the more recent review, starting back in January 2022, we kicked off the concept and schematic design process for the proposal that you see in front of you today. So we are now we're now at, I think, meeting number 8 or 9 of the joint PFRC and BLPC group. But this initial process concluded back in October with action by the school board recommending what they're calling the base education spec option, which requested capacity of about 1,600 students and $182 million project cost. So since the use permit has been submitted, this item has been back to the PFRC and BLPC twice. We held 2 virtual public meetings a couple weeks ago just to answer additional questions. Upcoming, we have another PFRC meeting on May 17th, and then we will visit several commissions, including C2E2, the Parks and Rec Commission, Transportation Commission, Planning Commission, and then we are scheduled to go to the County Board in June. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to introduce Jasmine and Jeff Chambers, who are going to give a presentation representing the applicant.
Thank you, Olivia. Actually, Jasmine will be from Stantec Architects, will be providing the presentation this evening, and I will be here for additional questions as well as Jasmine. So I'll turn it to Jasmine.
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening, everyone. This is, as Olivia mentioned, this project is based off of approved documents, schematic design documents, and project requirements that were approved by the school board back in 2022. In terms of where we are in the project, the items you see checked are meetings, are phases that we have completed, and as Olivia mentioned, we are working within the use permit process now, working towards a county board approval in June. The project is a phased project, and the beginning of December 2023 will be the beginning of the new ACC construction, and that is scheduled to be complete December of 2025, and the entire project is going to complete summer of 2027. As Olivia did a great presentation in terms of the overall site. We're going to dive into some of the areas that are identified in blue. Before I do that, I want to mention, and reiterate, this is a curbless environment, but we do have areas designated using site furnishings to designate areas that are only accessed via vehicles. And so those are kind of outlined with these site furnishings that you see in the rectangular and circle layouts. We also have a number of on-site stormwater detention areas that are capturing rainwater from the new ACC, and those are located along the perimeter. As Olivia mentioned, we are developing the site and streetscape along the entire perimeter with the exception of the area just adjacent to the MPSA at this time. In addition to the synthetic field here, we do have some synthetic play areas for the early childhood and teen parenting programs for the new ACC, a small dog relief area. In terms of orientation, the main entrance to the new ACC is located on the south. There is a secondary entrance on the north, access off of 7th Street. Throughout the process of design, we have pushed back the building edge off of 7th Street to provide a larger buffer zone to the community. And that's something that has come up throughout the design process. We've also been working with the county to develop more of the library plaza area here. And so you'll see that in some of the enlargements. In addition to the bioretention areas that are located along the building, we also have some site bioretention areas that are capturing stormwater from the curbless environment, and those are located along the north edge of the existing ACC. We also have some located on the north edge of the play field. In terms of pedestrian circulation, they'll be able to circulate along the streetscape, both on South Waterbury Drive, 9th Street, South Highland Street. But we also are looking at the curbless environment as an opportunity for, again, pedestrian flow, bike flow, and only service vehicles and buses. With that, I'm going to dive right into the next slide. This is a diagram showing the proposed campus lighting diagram. And I'll just mention that the placement and density of lighting is still being studied, but the county standard light fixture for the streetscape is shown in pink circles. The proposed pole lighting for the campus is shown in blue. And there are going to be areas where it may be more appropriate to have building mounted lighting to mount to provide adequate lighting for pedestrian paths. And that will be located along the garage east side here. Along the service area here of the new ACC and along the east side of the existing ACC.
Jasmine, I just wanted to add that the lighting that we're providing internal will be dark sky compliant.
Yes. So in terms of our first enlarged plan area, looking at the entrance to the new ACC, the library plaza, we're looking at taking the pattern of the curbless environment and extending that into the library to make this a unified plaza for both the library, the existing ACC, and the new ACC. This is a better diagram showing you the location of that furnishings that help to define areas that would be located for pedestrians only versus vehicles. And this is, if you were to stand at the entrance to this curbless environment, at this location of the line looking towards the west, this is that campus section that you would see at this location, the building elevation of or height mass of the new ACC. There's a bioretention area here. We are flanking the edge of this bus path with trees. And then you see the volume of the library here. These are president images looking at the character of how these bioretention areas could look. We're looking at studying with APS whether those have seat walls for seating and still studying the planting. This is a similar plan, but really focusing on the streetscape for South Wateree Drive. Each of these sections here correspond to a section on the plan. And so we're looking at, in terms of South Wateree Drive, there's a streets buffer zone of 14 feet. There's a bike zone, a bus zone, a travel zone, median, another travel zone, bus zone, and bike along this edge here. As we go further down, these two sections correspond to where these two blue lines are, and the dashed lines represent those sections. And similarly, down here, you start to see the location of the bike lanes, bike storage areas, racks, but still the 14-foot wide. You see the tree zone within that 14-foot wide zone. The bike lanes, there's a buffer, parking, travel lanes, the media, travel lanes, parking, a median, and a bus lane. And then further down, again, maintain the 14-foot wide streetscape. The tree planting strip is the 5-foot zone within that, with the bike lane, bus, travel, median, travel, bus, and bike lane.
And just for everybody's information, we are coordinating with county with regard to the Complete Streets project that is happening between 6th Street and Columbia Pike. And we are also working with regard to 9th Street and what that will become as part of the streetscape. So that will come into a clear picture as we continue to move forward in partnership with the county.
These are some 3D views showing you that entrance from South Wateree into the curbless environment. This is the entrance to the new ACC. This is the extension of that plaza into the library entrance. This is that portico of the library that exists right now. And you can start to see the site furnishings that are defining the pedestrian-only paths.
And one thing too is I think everybody's very interested in what the buildings are going to look like. The buildings are white, so that we're looking at the circulation. They're not white or concrete like the existing career center. there'll be images further on in the presentation.
Yes, sorry about that. This is aerial views of the same entrance, both with buses and without, just so you can see the scale of that curbless environment and the flow of pedestrian vehicle and so pedestrian and bike traffic. This is an enlarged plan of the new ACC at the north end. So this is South 7th Street here. A larger area view showing the entrance off of 7th. There's bike storage racks at each of our entrances of our buildings, along with bike racks along South Walter Reed and some near the synthetic turf. There's the streetscape canopy trees, and then we also have canopy and floral decorative trees within the campus. And again, present in images that we're studying with the team of kind of the character of what this could be like. This is the tot lot that I mentioned earlier, and there's an access sidewalk from 7th Street to provide access to the tot lot, which would provide access to the teen parenting and early childhood programs entrances, and also an egress stair exit. These are some three-dimensional views. If you were standing on the corner of 7th and South Walter Reed Drive, this is a view of that 7th Street entrance of the new ACC. I see the plaza, the bikes, and the scale of the trees that are being proposed. This is a view if you're looking down South Walter Reed Drive towards the library, and you're looking at that buffer zone on the corner of 7th Street. These are images of trees that are being proposed and studied for use on the campus. This is a large view of the west side of the campus and showing the synthetic field. And so South Highland Street will have the streetscape section, but we will also have trees along the edge of the field. The field will also have a 4-foot fence for the majority of the perimeter of the field, and then we'll bump up to a taller fence along South Highland that will turn 20 feet on the north and south sides to keep balls or frisbees from coming into the neighborhood. We are also looking at a tree bosque area, and this is a grove of trees that can provide some shading for students and pedestrians who are on site. And this is some present images of what that tree bosque area could look like. And these are some three-dimensional images. If you were standing in the tree bosque looking towards the north, what you're seeing here is the screen enclosure that wraps around the automotive enclosure here for the program to shield the cars for that program. And this is a view a little bit further out, looking at the corner of the new ACC, introducing some stepped seat walls that could also serve as benches. These are some sections through the campus. Both, this first one is if you were to stand here looking north, and you would cut through the automotive area. And so you see the screen wall proposed for the automotive and the scale of the tree bosque, the curbless environment, and then the tree planters that are on the other side adjacent to the 4-foot fence of the play field. And this section cut further south is down here, showing the cut through the planter area that's shown on this rendering in this location. This is a view of the site if you were standing on the corner of on South Highland Street looking back towards the new ACC. The existing ACC is a bit off the page, but these are the bioretention areas that are running along the north edge of the existing ACC. And a view of again the street furnishings, site furnishings that are helping to define pedestrian-only areas on the site. This is a visual of that 4-foot high fence surrounding the synthetic field. Some additional views of the site. This one's a little closer up view of the 4-foot fence surrounding the synthetic field. This one's a little further back if you were tucked under the overhang of the existing ACC, giving you a better view of those bioretention areas Some additional on-site sections. This is the entrance off of South Walter Reed. This is South Walter Reed Drive on this edge. South Highland is a little further up off the page. This is the corner of the synthetic field. So if you're cutting through the library, that's this first image here. And then the second cut is cut through looking, I'm sorry, this cut here is through the first section here, and this one through the library is further down. These are some aerial views of the site. Again, if you were on the South Highland Street, but a little further up in the air, getting an aerial view of this pedestrian curbless environment where many of the buses would approach and run through the site, both with and without buses in terms of these views. This is a good opportunity to see the height of the fence. Right now it's shown white, similar to the buildings, but we would probably be looking at, other color opportunities for that.
One thing I just want to note with regard to the buses, we're just showing that as scale at this point in time. If we do not expect to have buses going 2 directions at any time, because for the new career center, buses would be coming in from Walter Reed and exiting on Highland, because we would be unloading students to the school side of the bus. And when the existing career center, as the board has established that they intend to do, would be an elementary program, the buses would not be there at the same time.
And this image is a blow up, just showing again, some precedent images of some site furnishings that we're studying. Again, the intent is to use these to better define areas that are for pedestrian only and vehicle only zones on the site. This is a large plan of the corner of 9th Street and South Highland, showing the garage. Again, they will have streetscape improvements along 9th Street. As Jeff mentioned, we're working with the county on the streetscape improvements on 9th, but we are pulling the building back off of that corner, which creates an opportunity for some additional planting. We're looking at a combination of both canopy trees, but also some smaller undercarriage trees as well to infill that. This section here is this blue section looking north, and it shows you the height of the garage relative to the trees and that green space as it varies along this edge. Now I'm going to begin to talk a little bit more about the architecture. This is a 3-dimensional view of the new ACC. This is the main entrance.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure that we are starting our questioning period by 8:30. I don't know how many slides you have left, but I thought I would give you as long of a heads up as I could.
Okay, sure. This is a 3-dimensional view of the new ACC. The building, in terms of massing, steps back towards the west, away from the South Walter Reed Drive, intentionally to make sure that the scale of the building along South Walter Reed Drive is more in line with the scale of the neighboring buildings. And so the high portion of the building, the highest volume of the building is on the south end, and it steps down, and the lowest volume of the building is along adjacent to 7th Street. In terms of materials, the building is looking at a combination of masonry, which you see in this kind of beige color. There's metal panel, and there is some phenolic high density panels as well. We are also been studying the music roof and are showing a refinement to that roof to simplify the form. And you see the roof top enclosures for the mechanical units that are on the roof. This is a 3D view of the building looking on the side that you would see from South Highland Street. Again, this facade has a lot more masonry than the other side, but you see the volume of the gym, and we're taking an opportunity to identify some accent opportunities on the facade using phenolic panels. This is that tree box area and the enclosure for the automotive. This is a view of the 3D view of the building, main entrance again. And this is a street view looking at the corner of 7th and South Walter Reed. This is the view if you're standing on South Highland Street looking back towards the building. The play field is here. We've conveniently not shown the fence, but it will be there. But the masonry facade you see in the automotive enclosure. We have a few images of the garage. And this is like the garage parking entrance, which is about midpoint along 9th Street. Facade, we're using a combination of precast concrete for the facade, and then there will be some color metal panels to provide a little bit more energy along the facade. And it'll be kind of in line with the metal panels that would be on the new facade of the existing ACC. This is a view of the east side of the garage. And they're looking at the a bike entrance for bike storage and a pedestrian entrance into the stair. This is a view of the garage looking down towards 9th Street, the corner of 9th and Highland. Those are the grove of trees that I mentioned earlier, and the trees that are running along the treescape of 9th Street, which do a pretty good job of kind of concealing the view of the garage. And this is the corner of the parking garage facing South Highland Street. This is the stair tower. One of the things we're doing is introducing glass into that tower to provide a sense of security, but also including metal panels and a combination of trees and screening on this facade. These are image boards. They outline the materials that I mentioned earlier. If you're looking at this on your own, this is a description of the finishes. This column shows what that material looks like, and this is the proposed finish of that material. So these material boards have been provided for the new ACC and a similar board for the garage. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. I believe that we are able to go to discussion from the working group. I want to take the opportunity before I see any hands come up to just remind anyone who is here to provide public comment to please indicate please indicate in the chat, and we will get to you at the end of the discussion. Betty, I'm going to start with you.
I want to thank Jasmine for her lovely presentation that looks gorgeous, which is great to see the amount of thought being put into the development of this site. But I have to say that representing in this forum, not myself, but Arlington Heights Civic Association, that we have some serious concerns about the permitting process. We would like very much to see this site as a phased project, and the use permit has to be a phased use permit that clearly shows the final condition of the entire, and I do mean the entire property, all of Highland, all of 7th, all of Walter Reed, all of 9th. And we want to see a final condition in the phased use permit that shows the current Montessori school, the one that's at the corner of 7th and Highland, gone, and the lost green space, because this plan loses substantial amount of current green space, and play areas open to the public restored. This site is not what I'd consider delivering on the promise of creating the gem and the jewel of the county along Columbia Pike. Arlington Heights can't support this use permit without the following: expanded parking lot to include parking for students. This is unlike any other high school in the county. This is a commuter high school with students coming from across the county, and they need parking on site. There needs to be an elevator in that garage for accessibility, because when it is not in use by the students, my understanding is that it will be open to the public who are going to be using Columbia Pike. 2, we need to bring the corner of 7th and Highland in the first phase of transition up to the same high standard that Jasmine has described beautifully for the width of sidewalks and green space as the rest of the site. Currently, they are accepting that corner of 7th and Highland from this permit. And we don't want that as a neighborhood. We want the streetscape and the sidewalk to continue around the entire site. And we want and again, as I said, we want a phased permit that clearly shows there will not be 3 buildings on that site. There will be only 2 buildings with restored green space. That's my comment. And I'm done.
Thank you, Betty. Linda, to you.
Can you talk some about the bike racks in terms of, it's one thing to have bike rack storage in the garage, but bike racks, this is obviously a this is a site that's taking up an entire block, as it were. So where do you envision having groups of bike racks around the entire campus? Since we're talking about a significant student population and residents and visitors using this site. Also, is there any consideration that there will be public art somewhere on this site? And also, can you clarify, is there a bus stop on Walter Reed? And if there is, how is that being affected? And that's it for now. Thank you.
Jeff, do you want me to answer?
I can start. Okay. You can fill in. As far as the bike racks go, the bike racks are going to be determined by our MTA in the use permit. Basically, it's based on the number of students, and we will be providing all of those bike racks. We will be providing them throughout the site, as Jasmine had presented, along Walter Reed, at the main entrance, at the 7th Street entrance, back at the field. There will also be bike racks adjacent to the existing Career Center and MPSA, because all of the population will be counted as far as the number of bikes that need to be provided. The bikes that will be in the parking garage are the staff bikes that we are required to provide, which will be also included in the use permit. As far as the bus on Walter Reed, that is all being reworked with the complete streets, and that will be provided, I believe, as islands, as the plan currently shows, close to 8th Street, both northbound and southbound, at that location. What question am I missing, Jasmine?
The elevators in the garage.
Oh, the elevators in the garage. There are 2 elevators in the garage. APS has a policy that all buildings that we create will have 2 elevators in case one is not in operation at any one time. So there are 2 elevators in the garage structure.
Any public art?
Oh, at this point in time, we do not have public art incorporated into the project, but there are plenty of plazas for that, and we also intend to have student art. So
that would be even better. Yes, that it would be student. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, I'm going to go to you.
Hi, good evening. This is Kathy Guernsey with the Columbia Forest Civic Association. First of all, Daniel, take this opportunity to welcome you. Thank you for chairing. Welcome to the org. I wanted to just quickly, without taking too much time, just offer support to some of the prior comments that have been made, expressing concern regarding the permitting process and ensuring that that process is undertaken in a manner that is consistent with the stakeholder, the folks who live in this area adjacent to this development, in a manner that is consistent with what they're asking for. I also have a question, and I know the answer is going to be maintenance, but it is disconcerting to see so much green space being lost, and in some cases replaced with synthetic turf, a product that there are still some questions around its impact, both in terms of environmental impact on people physically, as well as just the wider environment. It seems a real shame to lose so much green space and to have areas that could be natural environments be taken up with synthetic playing fields. So just wanted to add that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. There not being any hands up, I'm going to recognize myself and ask a few questions. Brian, to Brian Sigritz, I see your comment. We'll get to you in the public comment portion. I'm grateful for your presence, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So my first question, I guess, is whether or not, well, my first question I'm going to actually pose to staff rather than the applicant, and that's to please explain to me, to county staff, and that's to please explain to me where is the threshold between a use permit and a site plan, in this context, what are the elements that cause it to be coming in under a use permit process instead of a site plan? I'm sure I'm going to regret having asked it once you've explained it, but I would like that background to begin with.
I might ask Matt Matuzik to help explain the difference here, but my understanding is that they're within the uses allowed in the S3A zoning district and the modifications that are allowed within that district as well, which is why they're allowed to go through the use permit process.
Olivia, this is Rob Gibson from DES. The zoning ordinance requires all school sites to have a use permit approved for the sites subsequent to a county board changing the zoning ordinance, I think in the 1990s. And so everything since then has been brought forward as a use permit, and everything before that is grandfathered in, but then when changes are made, it gets brought forward as a use permit. So all of our schools are use permits.
So Rob, you're saying that the site plan process is foreclosed to APS, but I would still like to hear from Matt, even if it's just to confirm Olivia, like what, under normal circumstances, what would be the distinction between the two? Because that's going to be helpful for me. I suspect it might be helpful for others as well.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on what Rob just mentioned, I believe, I have to pull it up again, but I think there's a use table in the zoning ordinance that speaks to, in the S3A zoning district, what uses are permitted, which ones are prohibited, and for those that are permitted, are they permitted by right through a use permit, or I believe a special acceptance site plan. And if I'm not mistaken, schools, specific school types, are permitted by use permit. So that table, I think, is what instructs staff and APS to proceed with the use permit path rather than a site plan. That's my understanding, but we can double check.
And we treat the school use permits when they come in for full reconstruction, similar to this, very much like a site plan. They have slight differences in the standard conditions, but those are tailored obviously to the applicant being the county schools. And so you'll open it up at the end of the day and you'll see 40, 50, 60 conditions. Those crosswalk pretty closely to the conditions we use with our site plans.
Okay, thank you. And then the two other questions I have are both for the applicant, and would love to get answers to those. And then I see Linda's hand back up. So Linda, I'll go to you after that. But my two other questions are actually three, sorry. One is, are any of the internal circulation pathways, basically the upside down H, as I look at the slide that's up right now, is any of that permeable or pervious in its treatment? Two, related, what are the existing and proposed perviousness ratios for this entire site? And then I will just echo that I also really want to see what the long-term plan is for this. You know, if this were any other applicant, it really does seem to me that we would be talking about this in the context of a PDSP. Well, I'll yield to the applicant for those three questions.
Yes, as far as the perviousness, we had looked at pervious pavement. It was cost prohibitive, but we are actually running the hard surfaces into the biobasins that were pointed out. So the slope actually, or the site, for the most part, slopes from MPSA towards the existing career center. So you notice we have the basins along the existing career center to catch that surface water. And then we have similar basins in front of the existing MPSA building to catch that water. And then running down on the west side or the east side of the field where the tree grove is, that is actually a permeable surface. So we are infiltrating as much of that hard surface. We aren't putting it right through the pavement. The turf field is permeable as well, but it's counted in a similar way as a permeable surface would be. The next question was?
Well, I think you answered the two questions, and then the
Okay.
comment that I had was that I, well, I'll join in the questions about the comments about really wanting to see what the actual long-term plan is for the entirety of the site. To me, this is not a proposed use permit for the entirety of the site. It's a proposed use permit for part of the site that indicates that a substantial portion of the 1974 building, a 50-year-old and plus building, is going to be retained. You know, if this were any other applicant, we would be expecting to see what the plan is for the replacement to a building that is rapidly nearing end of life. So that's just a comment. If you want to provide, if you want to respond, that I certainly welcome it. Otherwise, I'm not going to put you on the hot seat if
Well, no,
you just want to say so noted.
I can answer. I can answer as the information that I have, and the school board has acted at the end of schematic design. They've actually acted in the CIP to note that it is their intention in the future, near future, to relocate the MPSA program into the existing career center.
Okay.
And they are intending to remove the existing building and turn that into athletic field and/or green space. And that is the action that they have taken in the motion that they did in schematic design as well as in the CIP. Again, you know, it's not set in stone till the board, you know, puts it into a CIP and provides funding for that. So at this point in time, it's not funded. So that's the reason why it's not being shown or expanded at this point in time, because there is no funding available for that. This should be addressed at the next CIP. We've actually done some studies already on the existing career center. I think when they do their next CIP next summer, I believe it's going to be there based on the information that has been provided by the school board.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. That's informative, at least for my purposes. So I'm going to go to Linda and then to Chris.
Okay, question about the play area facing Highland. You indicated that there would be a wall, obviously to keep balls from going out into the street, but I thought you said something about 20 feet high. Is this going to be some sort of solid wall? Will it have slats to stop any balls from going into the street, but you can still see through the wall? What kind of materials would it be in terms of visibility for that area while providing the use that it needs to provide of keeping things in the play area?
I think we're looking at about 10 feet, not 20, and it would be a screen fence, an athletic screen fence, whether it's rubber-coated cyclone fence or some other. We don't have that fully determined at this point in time, but it would be the same fencing that would step down more than likely to the 4-foot fence surrounding it. Shown in the rendering as white. We probably will not do it as white because white really stands out. If you use a black or a brown, it generally disappears. So we want good visibility through that because, again, we look for crime prevention through environmental design. So we want the site to be seen, and we want to be able to see through the trees and or the screenings.
That's exactly what my concern was. Thank you. That's great.
Chris, you're next.
Thanks. Just wanted to take the opportunity in a new venue to ask the same question I've been asking for 17 months since schematic early concept design. When we redesigned Columbia Pike, we decided that bikes don't belong on Columbia Pike. They belong on 9th Street and 12th Street. This project's going to put a 350 or so car garage emptying straight onto 9th Street. And I just really don't think it functions as a bike boulevard with that additional traffic, and that this project needs to take care of its impacts and provide some bike facilities on this block of 9th so that these kids and other people traveling east-west along Columbia Pike have a safe opportunity to do so. And I was just wondering if there's been any final agreement between APS and Arlington County on what that 9th Street streetscape or street design is going to look like at this point.
We are looking at multiple options that do actually have bike facilities. We don't have it finalized as of this point, but Rob Gibson, if you wanted to add to that, we are in dialogue with regard to 9th Street and working through those issues.
So APS and the county are collaboratively working on looking at 9th Street to provide the bike facilities that are identified as a bike boulevard. One of the big issues is I think we've gotten a pretty good idea of what can and should be done on the western half of 9th Street, closer to Highland, but we need to work additional details into the Complete Streets project as 9th Street approaches Walter Reed. And so until we've gotten that a little bit better figured out, we don't want to share our conclusions, but we will be able to share that at the Transportation Commission, the Planning Commission, and the County Board.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else on that, Betty, I'll go back to you.
Apologies, I don't know what the etiquette is, but Mr. Chair, I'd really like to make sure that Brian has an opportunity to speak on behalf of Arlington Heights Civic Association, so I would give him my time.
So I will rely on y'all to correct me on how I want to handle this if it's usually handled in a different way at the AWG. My inclination, Betty, since you're my instinct, Betty, since you are the actual representative of the neighborhood and the civic association to the AWG, would be to continue to include you at the table, and then to hear from Brian in public comment. There's nothing that prevents Brian from speaking on behalf of the neighborhood in public comment. I mean, he is the president of the Civic Association, but I am new to this role, and I'm happy to be, one second, Maren, I am on the phone, please. I am happy to be corrected if people, if we would normally handle things differently.
I appreciate the clarification. I'll defer to you as the chair.
Yeah, and Daniel, if I can, I think what past chairs of this group did, it was really their prerogative, is kind of assess, it was much easier in person, but how many folks were arriving that typically don't participate in these meetings because of a specific item that was being discussed. And I think before too much time went on, usually in most cases, folks had a chance to speak up to make sure that we didn't run out of time. But again, there's really no bylaws or anything specific dictating how and when that should occur. And I imagine as some of these meetings go on, we'll kind of get into a flow where you just make the best judgment.
So I'm not seeing any more hands up, which means I think that we are probably coming to the natural conclusion of our period, and so it might actually end up being a moot point. But Mr. Sigrist, we are going to hear from you, even if it's right now or if it's in a few minutes. Rest assured, I do really value and want that input. Are there any other members of the AWG who have questions or comments or concerns at this point? I take that as a no. So, Mr. Sigrist, I think I'm going to go to you then, and I'm grateful to hear your comment on behalf of the Civic Association.
Great. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak. And I also sent an email earlier to Olivia, and she said she's going to share it with the rest of the group after this call. I apologize, Daniel. I mistyped your email address originally, so I reset that to you as well. So our letter more details some of our concerns that we have regarding the Career Center use permit. We've been speaking at the various different committees and groups throughout this process. Yeah, I guess I should take a step back. Here in Arlington Heights, we've been long supportive of Arlington Public Schools. We actually have more schools within our neighborhood than any other neighborhood within Arlington. And we've been supportive of the Career Center overall. That being said, we do have quite a few concerns, and the concerns by and large echo some of the points that Betty made earlier in her remarks. One being that we really do want to ensure that the final condition is limited to 2 school buildings. We are very concerned about the lack of green space and the fact that the current Montessori building remains in this use permit, as well as the current Career Center and the new Career Center. So that's really going to limit the amount of green space available. So we want to see the use permit application revised to show a final condition of no more than 2 buildings and appropriate green and open space at the former Patrick Henry building, which is now the Montessori building. Tied into the green space, we want to ensure that there's adequate facilities. There's going to be things that'll be lost, including a baseball field, basketball courts, and playgrounds. So we want to ensure that some of those amenities are replaced, and to do that, you really do need to remove the old Montessori building to allow for more green space. We also had concerns about the fencing. There's a 6-foot fence proposed around the corner of 7th and Highland, which is inconsistent with most of the rest of the APS schools, who only have 4-foot fences. So we don't think that's as welcoming, and it'll kind of deter use of it. We want to make sure that the playground area stays open to the public. I should also say with the playgrounds, another reason we're concerned about losing so much green space and the current playgrounds is that they are heavily used. There's large apartment buildings right on the other side of the street on Walter Reed, the Fillmore Gardens, and a lot of the kids there use those facilities currently, as well as kids in Arlington Heights. So we really want to make sure that the proper green space is maintained. Might be of interest to you too. We have concerns about the sidewalks and streetscapes, and we want to ensure proper sidewalks and streetscapes around the entirety of the Career Center site. That where the current Montessori building is located, they're really not doing anything. And with the volume of students and faculty and staff, being in the thousands, we want to make sure that the sidewalk around the entirety of the Career Center site is wide enough and adequate for all different people. That's most of our concerns. We also have concerns or questions about environmental standards. It's not really clear if it's going to be at the same environmental standard as some of the other recent APS buildings. And also want to make sure the parking garage condition is adequate. I think some of the slides that were included in this presentation, we'll probably have less concerns, at least as of now, with the parking garage condition, and it seems to be doing a good job with that. But want to keep an eye on that and also make sure that there's adequate parking. But thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I guess the main takeaway, I know I've said a lot, but the letter we submitted details all these concerns more, but the main takeaway is we want to make sure there's adequate green space for the neighborhoods, both for our neighborhood and Penrose and the other surrounding neighborhoods on Columbia Pike, and that that the final site only shows 2 buildings. Really, this use permit does not show what the final intention is, and we're concerned that since the use permit shows 3 buildings, that those 3 buildings will remain. So we would like to see the use permit modified to only show 2 school buildings. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
And thank you for joining us. Olivia, I think that this is going to start wrapping us up for the evening. Can I ask you to go to bring back the engagement calendar slide for this? I think this is your deck that we've got. Well, okay. Sorry, it wasn't, but let me ask you to just bring that one back up.
Yes, no problem.
All right. So I just, y'all probably know this better than I do, but I'll just remind everyone that, while we are hearing this as an informational item, and while we have taken the opportunity to raise questions that we will have and provide some feedback, of course, there are still a number of opportunities that we as individuals or on behalf of our neighborhoods will have to weigh in coming up. And we see, for instance, that there are 4 different commissions that will be hearing this, at which a number of items that have been aired this evening could be aired at least 1 or 2 or more of these, and be completely within the ambit of those commissions' feedback. And I encourage people to plan on participating or finding a way to do that. These are commissions that will be making recommendations, even if we are not being asked to make a recommendation this evening, which is just to say this is a big item, and there'll be more opportunities for discussion. If you, Olivia, if you want to correct me or add any or bullets to that, I would certainly welcome it.
Nope, well said.
Thanks. Thank you all. This has been a wonderfully smooth first meeting to serve as chair. I have always been impressed by the conversation at the AWG meetings that I have observed, both for the depth and breadth of the commentary, but also the professionalism and the collegiality and the camaraderie with which it's offered. And I am pleased to see that continue. And so I'm grateful to everyone and to our presenters and as well and staff. Olivia, unless there's anything else, I think that we can be adjourned.
That's it for me.
All right. I'll talk to you all next time.
Good
Have a good night, everyone.
Right.